we are going to be talking about how to draw men, how to work with men's anatomy, how to make stuff feel nice and proportionate. So we're going to start with general things to keep in mind. So hips tend to be equal to or less than the width of the rib cage because men tend to have thinner hips. They tend to have more narrow hips compared to a woman because of our pelvic size. So with a man, the hips, when you draw them, tend to be equal to or less than the width of the rib cage. Is this always applicable? Not necessarily, but biologically, this tends to be the case. Biologically, men tend to grow muscle easier. So even when leaner, when the body type is more lean or a little bit heavier set, muscle tends to be more pronounced on a man than a woman. Muscle growth tends to come from testosterone, I think. Oh, heavens. But because of their added testosterone, they tend to bulk up a little bit easier. So even when a man is a little bit leaner or is a little bit heavier set, he will generally still look more muscular than the average woman. This does not mean that they are always super, super buff, but in general, they tend to be a bit more strong looking. Masculine traits tend to be more pronounced at age 13 plus and are properly developed at around 16 plus. However, with children's anatomy, children's anatomy tends to follow the same or similar rules to men. Right? When we're drawing kids, a lot of these like proportional rules, like hips tend to be equal to or less than the rib cage, the general straight up and down rectangle. That's closer to men than it is with women. Like when women hit puberty, 13 plus, we tend to go through more drastic changes compared to a man. Drawing the transition between a kid and an adult tends to be a bit easier, going from boy to man, from girl to woman. Okay, proportions. How do you measure the body so it looks accurate to life? Always measured in relativity. That's what I was saying recently. So when you're drawing the body, you usually use heads to measure the body and eyes for the face, etc. Right? It does not matter what style you're working in. You are using your heads to measure the body. If you're working in anime artists, all of them know realism. Anime is no, what's the word? Shoot. Byproduct. That was the word. Anime is a byproduct of realism, right? It comes from realism. I don't know a single professional manga artist, professional anime artist who cannot draw a perfectly realistic human being as well. Yeah, so we always measure in relativity. Men tend to be 7 to 7.5 heads tall. 8 heads is considered the Superman proportion. That used to be the perceived thing because 8 heads is considered the idealist's way of drawing a man. More realistically, it's 7 and 7.5 heads. Because if we do 7 to 7.5, then that's around like 5'8" or 5'10" to around 6 foot, 6'2" or something like that. Because when we have 8 heads, that tends to be like 6'3" to 6'6", kind of in that area, right? Which is like considered like the ideal superhero man, right? It would be like 8 heads tall, 2 heads across the shoulder width. That's built. So that used to be the old way of doing it. Nowadays, it's a little bit more realistic to draw them 7 to 7.5 heads. So that's our head tower. We draw on the neck, we can kind of bring it down. Again, it's about a 1/3 of the head height, tends to be about the neck. And our shoulder width is 1.5 to 2 heads. Okay, so yeah, so 1.5 to 2 heads is the shoulder width. So when we take our head, I'm gonna be doing like 1.75 heads or something. So again, if I take the heads, flip them width-wise, and I just kind of do this magic. Yeah, something like that. That tends to be approximately how you can do them. And you would kind of bring in your trapezius so it curves a little bit more downwards. And then we can start the rib cage around here. This is more of the figure drawing person's way of doing it, but if you just kind of want to do the basic shapes, you can just draw your rib cage or your upper one as like a trapezoid with a little cavity on the bottom like that. If it's 7.5 heads, the hips will be at 3.75, so this is where the hips will be, approximately. Hips begin halfway, so it's about 3.5 to 3.75 heads. So again, with the hips, it's going to be an underwear shape, but this time the sides of our underwear are going to be curving in this way. And then women tend to be like this. The stomach would be kind of here, and then our hips. Once again, if we have the rib cage, which is kind of right here, it should be less than or equal to the width of the shoulders. So it'll be approximately like that. I break this rule all the time, but it is generally what you want to keep in mind.
If you'd like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education, become a member on Patreon.
So usually with men, you know, their bodies tend to curve a little bit more like this. Or just go straight downwards. They're a bit more rectangular compared to women. Again, very, very general. So, next thing that we're going to be doing is the legs, right? So anything in pairs you should do at the same time. From this point forward, men and women get really, really similar. This is why I say that when you are drawing like a man or a woman, there are some differences, but the majority of them are very, very similar. We have our thighs in, which we can kind of draw as like a trapezoidish shape, kind of like that. You can draw your kneecap as a hockey puck, which does work for sure. If you're kind of working on a more 2D scale, you can work with a coffin because this kind of works the same way. And then again, with our calves, the outer muscle is taller than the inner one. So we should have a kind of coffin shape, but one side will be higher than the other. So it'll be almost like that. And generally, our thighs tend to be about the same length as our calves. And then you can just kind of have the feet in there, which if you just want to draw a foot, like not really worrying too much about it, you can do a circle, trapezoid, triangle, semicircle. And from the side, that's a circle, trapezoid, triangle, semicircle. And that's an easy way that you can draw a foot from any angle. You just got to rearrange those shapes over and over. And then once we have our body and our legs and all that fun jazz, then we can add in our arms. Again, if our shoulders are kind of drawn off to the side here, you can start them off as 2 circles connecting onto the rib cage area. Then if we draw the upper bicep, once again, you can draw it almost like a trapezoid at the top of a baseball bat. Take the elbow, make sure it kind of aligns with the belly button. Somewhat aligns the belly button a bit above, a bit below. Bring your forearms down. Wrist tends to be right at the hips. So then your fingertips can end around halfway down your thigh. It's about like anywhere between 1/3 to 2/3 on your thigh is where your fingertips tend to end. So it tends to be kind of something like that.
If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an upload. Join our art community with the links down below if you'd like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education. Become a member on Patreon for working files, behind-the-scenes posts, and discounts on our class offerings. If you enjoyed this video, here's a couple other videos you can check out next.